Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Bonner here, Overtime Athletes. And for today's video, what I want to talk about is how you actually progress plyometrics and you know, from a training perspective, how we should be progressing. A lot of times what I'm seeing is plyometrics are kind of just randomly selected. But just like training, there's a way that we can intensify and build a base and continue to add on top of that base with your actual plyometrics, right? From a starting point of A to Z. So I want to kind of go over that of how you would accomplish this in an off season for an athlete. So let's get right into it. Phase one. So if the athlete's detraining, they're coming from in season or they haven't been training, really what you need to do on phase one is spend basically a GPP, a general prep, right? This is our adaptation phase. You can't just go into it and start loading the athlete up with intense jumps, right? This is where an athlete can either burn out really quickly or they can actually, injury can occur. So to create this general prep, you need to be doing things such as low-level plyometrics. So what are the parameters? As far as complexity goes, it's going to be low, right? These are low-level plyometrics, easy. When I say low-level, this is something that a youth athlete should be able to perform or that athletes do. Things like squat jumps, pogo jumps, but just done in a continuous fashion. The intensity is low, right? You're not doing these, you're not doing them in a way where you're doing rebound jumps and really intensified advanced movements. You're starting at a low level. Volume is actually going to be rather high, okay? So you want to accumulate as much volume as you can, as many contacts as you can. Obviously, it's not going overboard, but it's a rather high volume because of the low level complexity of the movement. And then time, you're usually going to perform this 1 to 2 weeks of adaptation. Moving forward, you're going to go into phase two, which is activation, right? Which is basically turning on the muscles. This is that isometric phase where you use isometric modalities, okay? This is really the goal of this particular phase is to increase that tendon stiffness, right? Reduce compensation and really turn on or recruit maximal motor units to then transfer over to the next phases. So as far as complexity, it's still low because you're performing isometric modalities, right? It's not a high velocity movement, so the complexity is rather low. The intensity is pretty low because you're not getting that stretch or shortening, you're just in a fixed position. So the intensity, whether it can feel high because it's challenged if you go for a duration of time, but the intensity is rather low. The volume is moderate, but it's moderate to high, right? And you base this off of how long you're holding that isometric hold or those isometric modalities. And then time, you want to stress this this phase will take anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. Moving forward, phase three is going to be all about absorption, right? And this is putting the brakes on. This is going to be all about teaching the athlete how to decelerate, right? Working that pre-stretch motion, that eccentric motion of a dynamic movement. Okay, so complexity has now become moderate to high depending on the modality you're using, right? Things such as a depth jump from a small platform is moderate. But right, if you're jumping into approach jump, tuck jump into a sticking a landing, that's a little bit higher complexity. The intensity is going to be high, right? Absorbing and teaching the athletes to accept force. The intensity is going to be high. The volume is moderate to moderately low because we want quality repetitions, okay? And then time frame, you're still going 4 to 6 weeks. Moving forward to phase four, you're flipping the decel and now you're working accel. So we just worked the stretch portion, now we're working the shortening portion. We're independently stressing that modality, right? This is our propulsion phase. This is all about that concentric motion, all right? So it's gonna be, again, it's gonna mimic right down the line here. So it's gonna be moderate to high as far as complexity, right? An athlete should be able to perform these. It's actually a little bit, I say high because the athlete needs to have the right intent and focus because the quality of repetition needs to be extremely high. The intensity is extremely high, okay? So this means that the all-out motion, like you can't just go through the motions here. To reap the benefits of this particular phase, you need to be locked in, and it needs to be all-out intensity. The volume is gonna be moderate again, right? And again, you can creep up on the high side. It's all relevant, because if we built the base up over here, right, we can add more volume over here because the athlete is now more conditioned. They're able to handle it a little bit more, okay? And then again, training time is gonna be 4 to 6 weeks. Phase 5. This is where phase 5 is a culmination of all these other phases. This is where we start to put everything together, and this is where we perform true plyometrics. So through that dynamic movement, right, jump, what you're gonna see is now we're gonna put together that stretch shortening cycle, and that, you know, really working that transition of ground contact and that transition between it, okay? So this is, again, putting everything together and really intensifying the movement, right? So as opposed to low-level plyometrics you should be performing throughout, these are gonna be things such as rebound jumps, where they're stepping off a platform and then jumping up onto a box. So we really intensify and advance the movements. So with that being said, the complexity is going to be high, the intensity is going to be high, the volume is going to shoot down. It's going to be extremely low, because every repetition is quality, right? Because of the intensification of the movements. And then phase-wise, you're only performing 2 to 4 weeks here to really kind of peak that athlete to go into then pre-season. All right, so if you could look at this is how an off-season plyometric is devised around the athletes that I actually train. This is the progression that I follow to ultimately peak them. So I hope that helps for your game. If you guys are interested in a full vertical program, check out the link down below. And I'll see you guys next video.